Hi guys, welcome to another COVID-19 Small Business Support Center webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the crisis of COVID-19, what it's doing as an impact on businesses, and how this is an opportunity for you to potentially reinvent yourself. I have two wonderful experts on today that are going to be giving us some insights, some tips, and some guidances. I'd like to introduce Julie Barber first. Julie, how are you?
I'm good, temporarily joined by the small person in the background, but great, thank you.
The joys of home working, hey?
I know, and homeschooling.
How's that all going?
Hard, tough, motivating small people to do maths and writing is quite the challenge, I tell you.
I think motivating older people to do maths and writing is quite a challenge as well. So well done, you. And Julie, could you just tell our audiences a little bit about you, your business, and what you do?
Sure. So I'm CEO and founder of Spark Consulting. So the consultancy has been running for just over 2 years. Before that, I have a 20-year history of large corporates in financial services, doing the full run between consulting, banks, and regulators. And now my consultancy works at the two complete opposite ends of the spectrum. So we work with corporates who need to transform how they work, either in part or in whole, and also help them innovate from the inside out. And also we work with startups and scale-ups who need to prepare to raise investments. We help them make themselves look really credible and confident in front of investors. And we also support them on their growth journey and thinking about their how they actually turn strategy into reality.
And I guess there's a big thing within your work around points of pivot and how sometimes, I mean, especially with the corporate innovation side of things, there's a lot of, it's not just the culture, there's a lot of planning and strategizing and reinventing that needs to go in.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I work with corporates and startups, because the things that they can learn from each other are huge, and all of them need to pivot. Startups are much better at pivoting because they're small and they're agile. Corporates are like juggernauts that kind of have to turn really, really slowly to get round the corner. Otherwise they'll fall over. So so understanding how to be able to change each size of organization and successfully, both from a financial but also a people perspective is hugely important.
That's brilliant. And we also have our resident expert, Piers Mummery. Piers, how are you?
I'm very well indeed, thanks. Yeah, very well indeed. I'm particularly looking forward to the session because innovation is always at the heart of what I love talking about. So absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's get stuck into this. I'm going to put the context down here, and then to start with, obviously, we're fully aware now, weeks and weeks, almost months into this pandemic, that it's unprecedented. It's something that we haven't experienced for things like 100 years. There's been a big shift in the way that people are responding to it. I think we were very reactive, now becoming a bit more responsive. I was only watching the news earlier this morning, and it was talking about retail on the high street and how they are going to have to change the way that they're going to have to work, bringing in booking systems and allowing people to come into their stores in a very, very segregated or distanced, socially distanced perspective. You've got restaurants who are now perhaps going to be reduced down to 50 or 30% capacity of clients into the restaurants, but they'll still have their ongoing costs. You just mentioned here, Julie, about the context of it's easier for a smaller business to pivot and change and because they're a lot more agile in this respect. But if we start with the definition of innovation and reinvention to set out what that would probably be a good starting point here. When we talk about innovation or reinvention, what does that actually mean when it's coming from you?
I think first of all it means that people need to have a really good understanding of actually where they are now, and you'd be surprised how often people aren't cognizant of where they are now and how that places them in their market or industry, and are they actually kind of lagging behind? Are they not, as out there as other people? And then when you understand where you are, then from there you can start to see, well, what else is possible? How can we challenge our current existence? So So, innovation has to come from an understanding of current position, and then it's about ambition. So it is current position to ambition, and how do you actually get there? And increasingly, it's thinking about how you can get there in different ways that you may never have imagined before, that you wouldn't think were previously possible. And it's about helping people to understand that they can step outside their norm. That they don't have to do things in the same way that they've always done them. They can step outside that. As a great example of that, last night, as a band that my husband and I both follow, called Mama's Gun, who normally play gigs all around the world, actually. And they were due to be playing a gig in London last night, but they couldn't, obviously. But they got hold of some new technology that meant that the 5 of them in their separate houses all around the UK could play simultaneously with no lag. And they put that out over Soho Radio, and they actually recorded a live LP during the course of doing the transmission. So they were able to completely innovate from a live gig. So they knew their normal place is we go to live gigs and we play music to people. And our ambition is to still play music to people, but our current place has shifted. How do we do that differently? So it was great.
That's the bit that I really like about this, because I think innovation as a buzzword is very much tied out like entrepreneurship and stuff like this. And I think this whole thing pre-COVID-19, as everyone's like, oh, we're innovative and we'll innovate, but what does that actually mean? I think right now people are forced into innovation. They've almost got to think differently. They've got to act differently. They've got to behave differently. And this all is very cultural as much as anything else. I mean, it's a great example that you bring around, a band who want to continue providing the service that they provide. I think there are 2 things that remain consistent here. One is their ambition to create and deliver music, and the other is to entertain their audiences. And those 2 things stayed or remain consistent. Just in your experience and your opinion, when people hear the words innovation or reinvention, it doesn't necessarily have to be everything that you've got to change in your business, right?
No, it can be the smallest things. And in fact, sometimes just changing very small things have massive impacts on people. So, just for instance, a company that had a lot of developers working for them who were working all hours of the day and night and forgetting to actually feed themselves. So they just said, actually, do you know what, we're just going to bring lunch in and we're going to bring dinner in because we know that you lot are here until 11 o'clock at night, and we'll make sure that we feed you. And suddenly the workforce feels better and they're a bit healthier. And it's a very small change, but it's something that might have felt unthinkable before. So, it doesn't have to be massive.
And we see a lot of pressure at the moment. Piers and I have done a number of different webinars around bulletproof strategies, and we've been talking about financial solutions. We've been talking about how to gear up and bring this whole methodology of survive, revive, and thrive. I think Piers is adding derive into that as well at some point. But it comes down to this whole thing of still keeping it simple. I mean, right now there is. Do you see this, Julie, as more of a real great opportunity for people to reflect, review, and go back and say, look, maybe this is the time to change the business into what it could be? Now, I'll give you a very quick example of this. Yesterday, we had a webinar with Brad Burton on it. And Brad is the founder of 4N, 4 Networking, one of the UK's largest sort of business networking groups. 6 weeks ago, could really see this tsunami of impact it was going to have on his business. Alongside with his team, decided to turn the whole thing from an offline face-to-face networking program onto an online business. The online community is now kind of ramped up. In fact, he's making more money in terms of revenue-wise performance than he's ever done before. And it's kind of given him a new I think there was an edge or a spirit of life into him where he thinks this is the future of his business. He's decided now to start cutting off his officing, and he's maybe looking to now reverse this whole thing of doing physical networking events. And I actually saw yesterday that they're actually starting to develop 4N Down Under. So now Australia is going to create its own network now because it's digital. So, again, when it comes to this kind of situation, entrepreneurs right now, or business owners, are kind of forced in this position that they've got to think differently. But what's your kind of point take, or what advice do you have at this stage where on how they should kind of bring it back, start to think a little bit more pragmatically rather than just kind of emotionally because they're losing business?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, because it is forced innovation at the moment, there's almost an element of shock for some people that it's kind of like, oh my God, we've got to change. We were just trucking along, doing our thing, and now we've got to change. So I think for some people, they've almost needed time to get over the shock before they can actually respond well. Some people leapt straight in, like your example, and were all over it and have already transformed their business, but others need a bit more time. But that doesn't just apply to business owners, it applies to customers as well. So some customers are really happy to go straight to a new model. Some customers are going, I don't know if I want to change how I do things. I might just sit back, and then they'll gradually start to engage. So when you're reflecting on how and if you change your own business, the best advice, as always, is go and talk to your customers first. And really engage with them and really understand what it is that they are going to want short term whilst we're in lockdown, and then longer term when we're coming out of that, because actually they might decide that they'd love to stay with a new online product, but they also might want to be, they might be desperate to get back to face-to-face contact. So I think doing that is key. The warning note I would add, though, is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because if you've had a very successful face-to-face, bricks and mortar business, don't throw that all out to go online, because that only suits the current crisis. What if next year there's a crisis that means the internet completely stops working for the whole world? You can't do anything. So you need to start thinking about diverse business models rather than singular business models. And I am concerned that many businesses are just trying to flip themselves completely into digital, not realizing that that's creating a risk in and of itself. So, be aware of the risks of what you're going to do as well as the opportunities.
And sort of, Piers, let me just bring you in here on this. I mean, we've talked about this, before. You've got your 5 kind of key points. We've talked about, deferred revenue and lost revenue and reduced revenue in terms of how businesses procure their, the money into the company. But here we're talking very much more about, it's not just agile thinking, it's also very diverse thinking from what Julie said. So what kind of things do you have to add to what Julie said?
I'm agreeing exactly with what Julie's saying. I think, I come back to the point you made about, understanding where you are now. And there's lots of different facets to that, but just the one that I tend to like focusing on is where your sales revenue is concerned. Understand whether it's been deferred, reduced, or lost. Because that will drive a different type of innovation and change depending on whether you're going to get that money back, if it's just been postponed, or if it's gone forever. Then I think, just to the point Julie's just made about risk, I think it's very important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, are you into nip and tuck mode, or is it a major operation? So can you just repoint the business? Can you repurpose the business? Brad has repurposed it, which is fine. But make sure you don't lose the historic business. You remember, for example, Coca-Cola many years ago decided to change the recipe for Coke, and sales plummeted. They didn't need to do that, but I think right now we are as a world, we are being forced into this change. So of course you've got to have innovation, but there are so many different ways to approach innovation. I love that quote from Henry Ford. He said, "If I ask my customers what I want, I'd say faster horses." You know, sometimes you've got to completely rethink the way you do business. And you know, and I mean, there's an expression in the finance world called blend and extend, which I think is a very good product strategy. You know, which is trying blending your products and widening the offering, you know, changing the propositions, enabling you to extend the runway of products and offering. And there's a lot within that, of course, but I think there are so many different facets to that, which, you know, businesses right now can take on board. And, you know, it is coming back to where we are now in terms of your business. You know, looking at the near term, I mean, you know, people used to have, you know, visions and missions. You know, I don't see vision and mission anymore. I see purpose and proposition. So what's my purpose today as a company? You know, forget the vision, because you know what, that's gone. You know, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to come out of this. Sadly, my business is going to have to operate pretty tactically. So I'm only going to drive quarterly plans. You know, my quarterly plan, I've got a very clear sort of methodology for a quarterly plan, you know, which involves defining my purpose, re-establishing my values, setting myself a goal for the quarter, building a strategy around that, and then the actions you're going to take to actually build and drive that strategy forward. You know, pretty simple, basic stuff. So it is back to basics, but you know, we're still at the sort of the tail end of the survival mode, and I think, you know, we're now finding over the next sort of 4 to 5 weeks, people will get to the point where people will work out whether they're going to survive or not. You know, and that's a tough position to be in, because not all of us are going to make it, as we talked about yesterday with NatWest Bank. You can't save everyone, but to save your business and get yourself into this sort of revival mode, you know, yes, innovation's got to be right at the heart of that, but with caution is what I would say.
So, Julie, I mean, are you this kind of period of time or uncertainty brings what I've seen two different types of business owners into play. You've got those that are driven to get through this and, you know, get out to the other end, and you got those who are now actually questioning whether this is the right business for them, or things that they should have been doing, or if this is the end of the road. Do you see that in people like that you're engaging with right now as well? Do you see when you're talking to them about here's an opportunity for reinvention or reinnovation or changing something, as you say, not fully, you know, bringing in more of a diverse strategy and, you know, that blended approach that Piers was talking about? Do you see that there is this contrast in business owners who are, you know, some are kind of thinking that the game's over really for them?
I think there's almost three groups potentially, rather than one as such. I think there is the people who are right on the edge, who are in it, you know, in it to win it, and they're driving hard and they're all over this like a rash. And then I think there are the people that you've described who can't see a way out of it and think that they're going to go over, that you know, they're going to go down in this. And then I think there's a bit of a middle group of people who are a bit shell-shocked, are a bit knocked by it, haven't quite got the confidence or got themselves up to that edge yet to really grab and tackle and figure out what the next step is. And I think they're the people that, you know, probably need the most help at this point, because the ones who've decided they're going out, that's it. They've mentally made that assumption. But the ones who are in that, haven't quite got that confidence, really just need a bit of help to define direction and get them back on their feet, and then actually they're able to really push forward from that. But they're just a bit shell-shocked, I think. So.
Julie, I think it's a good point you raised, because it comes back to your first point about creating some context about where am I today, and, you know, what's my outlook. And, you know, that outlook, and, you know, we said yesterday, okay, you know, this is all about mindset and attitude. It's the one choice you've got, is how to think about things. You know, my sort of natural default persona is sort of perpetual optimism, so I'm always optimistic about stuff. So I'm always going to lean into the problem. You know, I'm going to say, right, we'll find a way through. We can do that. You know, Bob the Builder, we can fix it. But there are many people who just don't have those mental tools to do that. So I see a lot of businesses today, and it's something that I've just really picked up in the last week, which are more lifestyle owners. These are not business people. You know, these are not people who live by spreadsheets and cash flow forecasts and models and, you know, cap tables, and they're just guys and girls who just want to go to work, earn a wage, and be self-employed. Those ones are, as you say, Julie, are probably the ones that need the most help, because they are in that sort of, my God, we've got some serious business issues. What do I do? And it's pretty easy to kind of just throw the towel in and give up and go and do something else, or maybe go and get a job. But again, I think the difficulty we have right now is we don't see what the next normal is going to look like. And so it's something my colleagues in this business I'm involved in, Tech CXO, we provide a sort of fractional directorship service. There's like 100 and so partners. And some of the thinking we've applied sort of looks at what they call the strategic management impact, which is trying to define where you were and what the old world looked like, and then what is the new world going to look like. Now, of course, nobody knows, so it's only the supposition. But if you think about, how we used to plan, the majority of businesses, it's a linear process. We start here, we go quarter by quarter, 6 months, you got the business plan, the forecast always goes up, the bottom right is always a lovely number, and so on. You can no longer have that linear planning process. The new way, it's basically iterative scenarios. So these are all what ifs. That's a terribly difficult place for a company to operate. What if this happens, and then that happens? So you've got to iterate a lot. That's a different mindset, which, when you apply that to innovation, how can you innovate when you're
and I think actually that's where the large corporates are going to struggle even more than smaller companies, because smaller companies can say, do you know what, we'll just come up with a 90-day plan and we'll review it after 60 days and we can see where we are and we can tweak. Large corporates take 6 months to come up with their plan for the year in the first place, and then they try and deliver on that plan. For them to have 60 and 90-day plans that they can pivot on is virtually impossible, because of the ways that many of them are structured.
Yeah, I mean, the larger organizations, particularly the public companies, where they report earnings on a quarterly basis, in the US, for example, that's 90-day monitoring. You can't do that anymore. Again, that changed from sort of periodic monitoring, which was, my 90-day plan, my 6-month plan, my year plan, is now real-time monitoring. You've got to know what's happening every single second of the day on cash flow, customers, revenues, sales conversions, all your KPIs, marketing, operations, logistics, all of that's got to happen. Depending on the type of business you're in. If you're a solopreneur, not quite so challenging, or different challenges, should we say. But that real-time monitoring of your business is a very, very hard thing for an established business to create.
So, I mean, this pandemic has brought two different things positively, I think, for corporates. In my opinion, I think it's disrupted them in a way that they need to start thinking more agile. They need to be a little bit more, there are major corporates that had business continuation plans, which are completely irrelevant now, because no one was planning for, this kind of instance. And they're now sitting there thinking, on the governance of this, what do we change our business continuation plan into? Where does this kind of go? You're hearing more and more about, like in today's news, about the collaboration between Oxford University and big pharma companies, etc., about vaccines. And you've got the Campari group who are creating this new kind of fund that's going to be supporting those in the food and drinks industry, etc. Like Piers says, there is this element of those that will lean in and those that will kind of stand back. Julie, do you see the same thing happening with corporates as much as in that kind of field? You're going to get a group of corporations who are going to kind of look at this as an opportunity, and those that actually just are going to see this as a major risk?
Yeah, I mean, there's some who've been gifted an opportunity in this. So, Amazon, of course, is right at the front there, and logistics companies in general are having the best time of their lives at the moment. Their biggest concern is making sure they've got enough staff to deliver on their demand. And then you've got other corporates behind that who sell services or products that are much more nice to have, if you like. So big corporate consulting, the big four, their ability to sell services at the moment must be massively compromised, because the companies that they normally help and work for in large part will be cutting back on their spend. So they've got to come up with new and different ways to actually reach their customers. And again, I think it's going to depend a lot on how quickly they can derive what their customers actually want, need, and then how quickly they can turn that into a new product. Now, some of those big corporate organizations have kind of front running, forward thinking units within them, which are product development areas, new innovation areas, and those ones will be better prepared for this type of thing because they're already looking out into the market all the time. They're already doing that kind of work. Those who don't have that in their makeup are going to really struggle.
I mean, it's an interesting point actually, because I think for the larger organisations which have traditionally had sort of omni-channel go-to-market plans, right now, because of the social distancing and lockdowns, we're going to see an enormous acceleration of digital dominance. As we've seen, with Brad's business, he's now gone online. We must remember, of course, that this is temporary. This might be a year, 2 years, to get over the, until we get the sort of herd immunity. So this will pass, and of course there will be a new marketplace out there, a new normality, and it will take a long time to come out of that. But I think let's not get ourselves into this false dawn position, because my business and Julie's business, and you as well, Ketan, from an advisory perspective, that's not going to go away.
No.
And the world is not going to go completely online, because you know what? I mean, we've heard all these lovely stories about people having happy hours at 5:30 on virtual. Oh, isn't that great? They're not going to want to do that when we can come out of lockdown, because you know what? There's something about touching somebody, hugging them, being with them, talking to them, giving them a slap on the back, and being part of that camaraderie in a group. You can't do that digitally. You can sort of temporarily create a solution, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah,
so
I kind of miss
normality.
I kind of miss the smell of the public establishments in London. Really, that there is part.
Depends on which ones you're talking about, but yes. But I think the point being is, don't be under the illusion that this new normality is suddenly going to be this virtual digital world. We're all going to be on webinars forever. No, we will not. We will go back to business, and this comes right the way back to the point I always make about if your revenue and customers are deferred, lost, or reduced. That's a huge strategic element in how you build your business or rebuild it. And I think for corporates, it's all about principally survival for the majority. I'm going to generalize massively here, because their core underlying business, you don't become a $1 billion company, £1 billion company, unless you've got something pretty good. So you need to adapt and modify that slightly. You don't need to reinvent completely. You've just got to find a way to survive through this to come out the other side. Smaller businesses, very difficult, because there are so many components that can be so quickly affected, and cash flow being the obvious one.
So I totally agree with these points, but let's look at things like open innovation as well. One of the things that you said earlier, Julie, which really kind of resonated with me, is what if the internet goes down next year? And you've got 2/3 of businesses that are now transformed or transitioned into online businesses that are literally going to have a COVID-19 pandemic within themselves. Basically, their business is going to be shut off overnight. At the same time, I feel that there is this air and sense of everyone has to figure out their own thing by themselves. The whole purpose of things like open innovation is to let go of the things that aren't really relevant to you and allow new, fresh perspectives to come in. How important, whether you are a small business or a corporation, is it right now that as a business leader and owner that you should be considering bringing in certain open innovation models as well?
I think there's a real balance to be struck, because there's so much out there at the moment. There's so much innovation. There's so many ideas. You could drown in trying to sift through it all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of choosing where you source your open innovation, choosing what you interact with and what you don't, and then being able to filter to help you, come to the right conclusions for your company. But I imagine there's a lot of people out there really feeling a bit overwhelmed with, we could do this, we could do that way, we could go in all these different directions. Which one is the right one? And no one has that answer. So I think trying to kind of make sense. How do you come up with a structure that allows you to decision make in a world where the rules are changing every day? Is quite is quite hard. But yeah, definitely more interaction between lots of different, businesses and organizations is a really good thing. But you have to always make that, with any innovation, you always have to be aware of how much good is it actually doing you, or is it innovation for innovation's sake?
To follow that point, actually, I agree, Julia. I think I would add that for people looking at developing an open innovation policy, you have to have some pretty major strategic value points to assess. And they all come down to your personal perspective. So if you're the CEO of a company, and I talk a lot about this right now. We have, and you can see this in economies around the world, we have this huge balance of economy versus humanity, and the value of life, and the value of business and economic decline versus people and so on. So that's a huge moral dilemma and a societal issue. But if, for example, I sat in my business and felt, right, my purpose and where I'm going is to be do something for society, do something for humanity, be a force for good, that will drive my innovation policy. If I'm thinking about my strategy and my vision for the future is all about making more margin, making more money, and making it easier and quicker to make more money, and I'm in the transaction business, I've got an entirely different innovation strategy. So I think just, it's a crude example, but think about your business if you are relationship based or transaction based. That will drive your type of innovation. And if you are more societal and humanity driven rather than economics and money, both those, there's different directions. And there are lots of phases in between that, of course. It's not binary, one or the other. But I think that setting that major strategy point is a very, very big part of this. And I feel personally that the modern business world has changed much more into collaboration, support, understanding of emotions, people, a lot more centric around all the humanitarian things. And, that's really where the business of the future is going to go. So I think, your strategy of innovation should build on those points and before we do anything else.
You both are experts in your kind of own fields in terms of, Julie, you bring a lot of expertise in capital raising, investment readiness, alongside this whole transformation and innovation modeling within businesses. Piers, you have a wealth of experience from many different genres. And obviously things like Tech CXO works on a basis of getting the right type of advisors and people into the business. How important do you both feel it is that business owners today need to, I wouldn't say go out there and sort of just appoint, but be getting experts to come in and help them in this period? So whether it's mentoring, advisory, coming on and some sort of innovation program that they're inducted into.
Okay, can I answer that first? I think actually, that's to me is the second part of the equation. The first part of the equation is, for a lot of, and I focus, like Julie, on sort of working with small business and emerging growth businesses, so scale up. So I've never worked for a company with more than 500 employees, unlike Julie, but so therefore I like to feel, I like that more agile environment. In that environment, business leaders tend to be a lot more exposed at a personal level and an emotional level. It is a lonely place. And I think the important thing I first and foremost say to anybody is have somebody you can talk to, whether it's a life partner, whether it's a business partner, whether it's a confidant, a coach, or just somebody to talk to. Because we are dealing in a scenario where nobody's got the answer. There is no magic wand. There's no cavalry coming. We're all going to figure this out together. So I think this is why we see communities coming together. So people are supporting each other. So my first advice to any business owner out there is it is imperative that you have people and somebody you can talk to. That's phase one. Phase two is to then figure out the areas that you feel you need that support in. So, we talk a lot, Kat, about sort of mindset and controlling your emotions. So if you've got a need and a requirement to sort yourself out emotionally, and develop a stronger mindset, then you've got a certain type of advisor and sort of coach that you might want. If on the other hand you've got a need financially to kind of put a financial function into a business and you haven't got that, that's a different type of person. So I think, but all of that comes down to figuring out. Just the first thing is to get a little network where you can talk to people and figure out. But I think the long tail of this is there's going to be a lot more advisory work required through sort of trusted confidants and sort of embedded advisors. So, you know, people will be joining boards on a virtual basis because, you know, you have expertise that the three of us plus many others have, and we can share that. You know, just this week, for example, I signed up with Altogether.
Oh yeah,
You know, wonderful movement. You know, there's 80, 100 people, all sort of business leaders in their own field doing pro bono work for SMEs, typically in the food services and retail sector. But my God, there's a wealth of talent there.
Yeah,
but people are happy to come and share, you know, and I think that's a really big part of it. It's just, you know, so it's not about money, it's more about the added value.
But again, and sort of Julie, what's your kind of perspective on this? Because I feel, look, as a business owner myself, multiple businesses, I've kind of in one area I've turned kind of advisor with my business partner in one business. On the other side, I'm actually trying to call in more and more people to come and give me an opinion on what they think this kind of move would be. I mean, for example, I sent you a message a couple of days ago about, oh, hey, I'm thinking about this. What is your advice on this? How important is it that small business owners start doing that? Because I don't think a lot of them are doing it right now.
Yeah, it's very important to have people that you can talk to who know what you're going through, because your family often haven't really got a clue what it is you do. They go, what is it you do all day? I don't know. So you can't talk through your business problems with your family because they don't really get it.
Yeah.
So, you know, whether you can join mastermind groups for business owners, they're a great way of, you know, meeting people in similar situations. Whether you bring in advisors, you know, on a part-time basis, that's a great way to do it. I've got a helper to come to help.
Mom,
Yeah.
And my barber's died of rubber.
Okay, don't worry. Okay.
Love it. Now I know who the real boss is, right?
Yes, we absolutely know who the real boss is, and it's not me. Yeah, so masterminds are great. Being able to bring in, you know, part-time or one-off advice as well is a great way to supplement your business. I think for small business owners, there can often be a perception that you know, you have to bring in a whole extra person and it's this big outlay and it'll be really expensive. And actually that's not true. You know, if you get someone to come into your business one day a month and provide you with insight and strategic direction that then you can get more junior staff to act on, that's a great model for actually bringing huge amounts of knowledge into your business in a really cost-effective way.
I love that. But I think there's also the added thing about the sanity it brings as a business owner as well, because there are a couple of things in here, and Piers has mentioned this in the past, that, you know, having that kind of advisory is going to either allow a little bit more challenge, so someone can come in and really challenge, are you doing enough, or could you be doing something more? There is this reaffirmation or confirmation of whatever it is that you're kind of going through, where your thinking is almost aligned to what this external person is bringing in. And then there's this whole area of, right, okay, is this really relevant? Should you really be wasting your time in this particular area here? The thing for me is it's those conversations. One of the reasons to why we set up something like the COVID-19 Small Business Support Center is to keep these conversations going and you know, keep sending these kind of diverse messages across, so it kind of filters through. I think there's this big block that like you've highlighted all the key elements into this, that people think that it's going to cost the world and they're not asking these questions. So, and I'm conscious of time here, what kind of advice do you have for those people out there, Julie, who are looking and saying, yeah, it's easy for you to say this, but I just can't take that left or right foot forward and take action? What kind of thing, apart from shaking them, what would you advise them?
I think, you know, most organizations that offer, you know, part-time directors or, you know, short-term advisory will always do initial discussions for free. They'll always be open to just talk to you about what's possible for your business. So take advantage of that. You're bound to get some golden nuggets out of just talking to them for an hour, let alone if you actually engage them and get them into your business. And if you get to the end of that hour and think, A, that was great, and B, actually it's not as expensive as I thought, then, you know, grab it with both hands and go for it.
I mean, just to add to that point, it's something I feel a lot of at the moment is, I mean, having just come back from America, which is obviously a very different cultural environment, but we're not very good at asking for help in Britain. You know, we have a bit of a stiff upper lip, and come right the way back to the very first thing that Julie mentioned about, you know, when so innovation is driven by understanding where you are at the moment and then coupling your ambition with that. Yeah, in order to have that ambition and that desire, you've got to have the confidence in your own self-expression, you know, and you've got to know where your strengths and your weaknesses are. So there has to be a big period of self-reflection right now, and having the confidence to say, it's okay to screw up. It's okay to not have the answers. You know, and if you don't know something, if you don't ask, you don't get. And as Julie said, there are, you know, a world of advisors out there who are willing to give huge amounts of advice for free. You know, lots of tools and resources. I mean, everything is at your fingertips. You have to just go and ask for it. So I think the sort of thought process I would advise anyone at the moment is, you know, is to assess your own thoughts. You know, assess where you're at personally. How much confidence do you have, and do you want your thinking to be challenged or reassured? You know, if you've got a very big ego and you just want to be reassured with yes men, you know, you'll go down one route. If you genuinely want some help and you want to learn new things and have your thoughts challenged, that'll take it in another route. But I think ask for help.
I think there's also a point as well there around understanding what is the best thing for you to spend your time on. So you know, that a couple of startup founders I know, particularly one of them, you know, she's got an MBA, she's done a master's in business finance, but she says, I'm not being the FD in my own business. I don't have the time to do that. I'm outsourcing that to someone that comes in once a month and does the FD role for us, and we have someone more junior in the office on a day-to-day who does the sort of general bookkeeping. So she's made a clear decision that that she's going to outsource something that she doesn't have time for, because her job is to be out there being the face of the company, engaging with customers, bringing in new, it's an export business, bringing in new overseas contracts and everything. So, you know, what don't you have time for? Well, that's where you need to bring in the help so that you can actually focus on the stuff that you should be doing.
And again, just you know, to kind of wrap up here, I think a lot of the small business owners' mindset is all about affordability. Even if I outsource this, how am I going to afford to pay them and things like this? But so I guess, you know, the net of what you're saying here is you know, you've got to smash through that glass barrier that you've put there by actually going out and having the conversation first. I mean, I've got people within my team who some that we've had to furlough, others that are on restricted hours. The furloughs are saying, look, do you know what? Take me back off furlough and I'll do stuff for free for the time being if that's what we need. I've got others in the industry are saying, look, is there anything that I can help you with? We don't want, you know, I don't want to be paid for it. I just want to be doing something right now, because they're kind of driving themselves up the wall. So here within itself is an opportunity where you've got people who are stuck in the same kind of position as you, about, you know, they're juggling a lot of things, homeschooling, they're running their business, they're trying to keep everything going together, and they, you know, they have a skill, they have an ability, they can come in and not just lighten the load, but perhaps take you to that kind of next direction. So, you know, we've talked today about innovation, and we've talked about reinvention, and that crises don't necessarily need massive changes. You know, even the smallest change can make the biggest difference, as you said, Julie. What last bit of advice would you give to audiences and business owners that are watching this today, looking at the next sort of 3 to 6 months of their business and saying, gosh, they're so uncertain at the moment, I don't know my head to my toe right now, and this whole thing about reinventing. What's the kind of last bit of advice that you'd like to give at this stage?
I think what's really helpful to do now is to create yourself a multi-scenario plan. So you know your business. what you can do is sit down and say, right, what would happen if revenue returns to normal? What would happen if revenue is reduced? What would happen if our revenue is completely gone? What would happen if we launch a completely new product? How would we work? And then plan for each of those scenarios. Really think through, what would you do in each of those scenarios? How would your cash flow be impacted? How would your overheads be switched up or switched down depending on which of those routes you follow? And then at least you've got those plans in your back pocket. And as things start to develop, even if you think you're on one track and then you start seeing that a different track is actually what's happening, you can go, oh, hang on, that's the trend that's appearing now. Let's pull out, plan B or plan C, and we've already got that ready. We've already had that thought process, because what you don't want to do is keep lurching from, one kind of reactive situation to another reactive situation. If you can get in front of the curve a bit and give yourself some options, then you'll feel much more secure and more confident, even if things do change, because you've already got a plan for what happens then.
Amazing. I love that. Piers, anything to add there? Closing comments?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every business requires a change plan. And I think I would have a plan that sort of sets context. So I would be advising a business to think about the sort of the now, the near and the far as part of your change plan. And anything that you do in the sort of short term are going to be typically adaptations, it's like refinements and minimal changes to the business. But keep that in the context of the longer term innovation, because adaptation creates innovation. So if you just change and meander along, that's fine. Don't knee jerk into things and take big panic changes. Think these things through and keep the context of your business today. If you've got a good business, it'll be here. We talked yesterday about lending. Banks will lend to good businesses. They want to know that you can pay the money back. So if your business is a good business, you'll be here. You've just got to find a way to get through that. So don't put too much change and too much innovation. We're in a forced scenario now. This is not planned innovation. This is forced innovation, as Julie said earlier. So just build some context. Think about short-term adaptations and changes in the context of long-term innovation.
Wow. Amazing. And like all of this, the time just flies every time we start with one of these things, but we are sadly out of time. Julie, just before we kind of sign off, how can people find you? If they want to come in and have a kind of a conversation with you, or maybe want to get into connection with the work that you're doing, how can people reach you?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter as Spark for Startups as well. On LinkedIn, just look up my name. And then also our website is spark-consulting.co.uk.
Wonderful. So look, for you guys watching this out there, there's abundance. There's so many golden nuggets in here. I think the most important thing that comes back out of this is, you've got to look inside. You've got to plan multiple events rather than just one straight line. Go out there, ask for the help, keep the conversations flowing. There is an abundance of advisors and experts out there that can help navigate. This isn't something that you have to do on your own, but you will have to make some change as you start to see yourself coming out of lockdown and into this recovery process. So crisis does bring an opportunity for you to reinvent yourself, but it doesn't mean that you've got to totally reinvent yourself. One or two small things can make a big difference. So that's it for this week. I really thank you, Julie, for joining us, and your team behind there.
It's been a pleasure. My special guest stars with me.
I love that. I love
Julie, what was his advice, by the way? What did he advise us to do?
Yeah. I think he was trying to tell me that the washing machine's about to wobble something off the top of it. So
that's the important stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Quality assurance was doing his audit and coming in and saying,
yeah, the risk assessment's been done.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and thank you for the time and the expertise. Piers, it's brilliant as ever. Thank you. But that's a wrap. Next week, we'll be coming back with a series really around management and change management, the culture, leadership, and then going back into those inner conversations. So we hope to see some of you come up and join us on those webinars. But again, right now, make sure you stay at home, stop the spread, and keep saving lives. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.